There's really such an incredible amount of blessing that can come out of just treating people right.
It's easy to want to focus on a pain point, but where you feel pain is not always what you're trying to solve.
We have to be proud to put our logo on all of our work. And if we're not, we shouldn't do it.
So if I go do really hard, scary things on the weekend, I come back to this thing and it seems pretty normal. I'm not going to die today doing this job.
Being able to make mistakes, sometimes expensive mistakes, is important. And without the ability to do that, it's hard to learn and to take risks that can be highly beneficial risks.
I feel like we just captured a breaking news moment. How did those sales go? What happens in that situation then? Tell us about it though. What does that mean? Why'd you get into that? How do you use it? There's an old adage that my father-in-law, who's been a contractor for 35 years, has written on the wall of his conference room of his business. It says, "The bitterness of poor quality remains long after the sweetness of a low price is forgotten." As I reflect on where the solar industry stands today, that quote feels more relevant than ever. We've seen explosive growth in solar over the last decade, despite market and policy headwinds. Installations are up, costs are down, and more Americans than ever are considering switching to clean energy. But this growth has brought with it some growing pains, particularly in how solar is sold to homeowners. The industry is largely split into two camps. On one side, we have the high-velocity sales model, the door knockers, the cold callers, the online quote generators promising the lowest price possible. They focus on volume, rapid closes, and squeezing every penny from the supply chain. On the other side are the companies embracing what I'd call a concierge approach, where the sales rep isn't just there to close a deal, but serves as a true consultant, someone who understands the technical aspects of the installation, who can speak intelligently about electrical systems, who knows how conduit will be run, what the permitting process entails, and what homeowners should look for in warranties. And the irony is that while the high-velocity model might get more glass on the roof in the short term, which certainly helps with climate change and resilience, it often leads to customer dissatisfaction down the road. When systems aren't designed correctly, when expectations aren't properly set, when the installer cuts corners to hit that rock bottom price, that's when we see the complaints, the bad reviews, and ultimately the damage to our industry's reputation. What the solar industry needs now, perhaps more than ever, is a return to the quality first principles. We need solar professionals who combine technical expertise with excellent communication skills, who prioritize education over pressure tactics, who aren't afraid to stand behind premium pricing because they know the value they're delivering. And all of that starts with getting things right from the very beginning. Accurate measurements, a comprehensive site assessment, realistic shading and production forecasts, and transparent communication about what the customer can expect. Our guest today has been championing this approach in Texas for nearly 2 decades. Stan Pipkin is the co-founder and CEO of Lighthouse Solar in Austin, a company that has built its reputation on architectural integrity and technical excellence. As an architect himself, Stan brings a unique perspective to our industry, one that sees solar not just as an energy solution, but as an integrated part of a building's design. What's particularly interesting about Stan's approach is how he's managed to incorporate innovative tools and processes, like using drones early on during the sales process, to enhance accuracy and quality while still maintaining that high-touch consultative sales model. Beyond Lighthouse, Stan has worked with the Architectural Solar Association and has collaborated with companies like Lumo Solar, developing architectural solar products, and Bodhi, a customer experience software platform. He's also been a leading voice in solar workforce development, advocating for a new type of solar sales rep that combines technical acumen with problem-solving abilities and communication excellence. Today, we'll explore Stan's journey in the Texas solar market, how his architectural background shapes his approach to solar, and what lessons other companies might learn from the Lighthouse model. Welcome to When Life Gives You Lumens, Stan. Thank you for joining us today.
Hey, thanks, Jason. What a wonderful introduction. I appreciate all those thoughts. If I run for office, I'll give you a call.
Please do. You're an easy candidate to back. All right. So I believe you're an architect by training. All right. You're a member of the Architectural Solar Association, as I just said, and you still run an architecture business on the side, right? Where did your love for architecture come from?
Yeah, and to clarify, I've got a master's in architecture at University of Texas here in Austin, and prior to that, studied geography. And I think there's a line to draw between the two. I was interested in kind of big systems. Geography is like what happens across the land. Big things happen, but they're very specific. Architecture is generally thought of as at the level of a building that has systems built into it, and does things for people, improves the way people live. But there was something missing between those two scales, and I was really drawn. I practiced architecture for a number of years, and was drawn to what was missing. Was how do you bring these larger systems to bear on how people live in buildings in the built world? And oftentimes the solution for an energy system, this was a total black hole for me, or blind spot. The solution was just to ask an engineer to figure it out, and you got a design, and that's what you ran with. And there was really no discussion about the quality of that, the purpose of it, the aspiration of it, to the extent that that energy system could have more meaning or more impact than the simple movement of air or the heating and cooling, or the infrastructure that's behind the walls. And so it really hit me like a ton of bricks that this is something missing. And I was afraid of electricity when I got into this, and I really just jumped in kind of headlong, and got the bug. Still think like an architect. Don't. It's much more of a hobby at this point. But I think the practices and the kind of perspectives I still carry with me every day.
So give us some examples around how architecture and solar can fit together. And obviously there's the straightforward one of, we're going to put panels on your roof, or some more and more people are familiar with, solar shingles. But I guess almost philosophically to start, and then feel free to go wherever you want. Where does that combination occur, and where do you think it's going?
Yeah, and I passionate about this. I could probably speak. I don't want to go too far back in history, but there was a time where if you ask somebody, which way is south, they intuitively knew it because they knew where their shadow was. They knew what time of day it was. There was a self-awareness that was really intuitive and very sophisticated. And then people built around that awareness. They, not just acclimatize the way they occupied the land or their buildings, but they developed incredible strategies of how to mediate. The sun can be too hot. The shade can be too cold, and there were all kinds of building solutions that mediated that environment. And so solar has been a part of our built world forever. When air conditioning came about, we kind of lost the need to embrace it really powerfully. And I'd say this last, the last part of the previous millennium and then into the 2000s, there's just been a strong resurgence of, we call it green building, but it's really how do we apply, our technical acumen and the technologies we have at our disposal to building strategies that mediate the environment in ways that are not new, but we have more power over certain things. So solar, the way we think about it in our industry, it's an active technology. It's some form of conversion, sunlight to electricity, but it's on a substrate. So that substrate can be a building material. So and there's incredibly wide and diverse and beautiful solutions of how that Oreo cookie, that combination of solar technology and a building substrate can translate into a building design. But it really takes the entire team, let's say from ownership to developer to architect to builder, to imagine that we can aspire to a new form of architecture. So this is parallel to Lighthouse, but it informs how we work at Lighthouse as an EPC. In the ASA, the Architectural Solar Association, we're encouraging to be bold, and this is we don't have technological hurdles. It's really just our imagination, our ability to work together, and to imagine that we can reframe architecture around energy. So these are kind of foundational principles, and that's what we're aiming to unlock. The technologies that arise out of that are really up to what we can do. You mentioned shingles. There's solar glazing. There's wall systems. Carports of all sorts, solar fencing, balconies. I mean, you name it. The applications are actually quite expansive, but we have to have the kind of courage to go for that. And so that's part of what is interesting to me, to advocate from inside the solar industry, to pull architects and the architectural industry into what we do, because I think we have solutions that harken back to age old patterns of habitation they're really powerful.
It sounds like you're a pretty big believer in BIPV, building integrated PV. There's a building in Manhattan that is at the very tip of it, and I believe the entire glass facade is BIPV, embedded within the windows. And you wonder kind of why we're not seeing more of that across all forms of facades or places where solar can go. What do you think?
Yeah, no, that's the exact question that we asked ourselves as well. Like BIPV. So our approach to that question is that BIPV sounds a little bit like it's somewhere between a disease and a solution. Doesn't sound that attractive, and it's been kind of it's been on the books for 30 years. It's coming. It's sort of the fusion of our industry. But we've coined a different term, not to be semantic, but we call it architectural solar, which in some ways broadens the set of applications. So BIPV, I think, is, like I said, it's the most integrated. It's incredibly interesting, incredibly innovative set of technologies. But there's other approaches that are not dependent on a single solution, that may not be listed or tested, or maybe expensive, or just may not fit. So architectural solar is what we consider to be the purposeful application of active solar technologies into the building design process. And so it could look like commodity solar, but done in a way that's very intentional, that supports or enhances the architectural program or aspiration of the building. So while we think BIPV is sort of one of the greatest examples of a process really well done, we don't want to stymie all the other opportunities to integrate solar into the conversation early and often.
If I can draw a line here, it sounds like traditional BIPV is a solar laminate, it's solar in a window, it's solar on top of a car, or you name it.
Yeah.
You're broadening. I know it is a little bit of semantics, but I'm glad you defined it for us. But your architectural solar definition is broader too. It could be a pergola, a carport, a bunch of other applications, really wherever you can put panels to drive electricity, and thinking about it more broadly, more holistically.
Yeah, just to sort of put a fine point on it, BIPV is at one end of the spectrum. So there's a continuum. I would say the far other side, and this is relevant to Scanifly, we can get into this, but on the other side is just why do we work around roof vents, on a given house? And so that was a simple conversation that could have been managed from the designers, the tradesmen, the people building the house, with multiple systems, and like an intentional array on a appropriate roof that's uninterrupted by other things like sewage, sanitary sewer vents. For us, that meets the criteria of architectural solar, even if it doesn't embrace any of the complexities that BIPV would suggest. So that to us is a real win, and it's actually hard to do. So we need to apply ourselves pretty rigorously to do that.
Well, if they installed vent pipes at the ridge or the eave or out this facade, it would make solar installs a lot easier. It would make Scanifly need another application.
Right.
All right. So I read in the Texas Solar Energy Society journal about a story about a dive bar in Houston in 2007. Apparently, it influenced your career a bit. I'd love for you to tell us that story.
Yeah, well, hopefully I'm not sure what else you read, so we'll need to check that
I'm going
out.
to keep it open ended so we can hear whatever you think we should know.
Yeah, this could be apocryphal at this point, but there was a point. I'm from Houston, energy capital of the world. Uh, Grew up there, very, incredibly complex, compelling, challenging place. I moved back there after school briefly, and happened to be in a dive bar and overheard a conversation by some folks. This is down. It was near downtown, so I think this is where Enron came out of. Heard some guys talking very animatedly about. It sounded like it was an Italian soap opera. I mean, it was really a lot of passion, and come to find out, they were talking about energy in a very specific way. They may have been traders or something like that, but they had a facility with concepts and language that was really exciting. I thought, what I've never heard anybody talk about energy in this way. And I was at the time working as an architect and working with mechanical engineers and electrical engineers. It just a world away. And so it occurred to me, it's like, where else can we embrace energy with this much passion? And it was at about that time that I had the opportunity to look at the solar industry as an opportunity, and kind of merging. I said, can we bring this technology to the level of the sort of daily inspiration that these guys had? And I was not modeling on Enron, trust me, but there was something that's very different about energy as a very relevant part of someone's life that was not really, it's not really accessible in other parts. Houston was a complete denial of that. We can live sort of post energy. So I really thought that there's an opportunity here. Can energy be a real part of our lives, and challenging? But then what can we do with this? Was kind of the question I came away with.
All right, so where'd that lead you?
Well, that was right at the time I happened to get started actually with Lumos. Lumos and Lighthouse Solar were kind of two sides of a coin back then. The company was a holding company, started in Colorado. So there's a manufacturing side and EPC side. And I was actually on the product development side, but then was shortly asked to co-found an office in Austin. And that's where kind of Lighthouse Solar Austin really was born. And we started kind of growing that inside, we'll say, the company umbrella, but quickly realized that we needed to be on our own. So we all actually agreed to become a franchise organization as a strategy to sort of, replicate but stay separate. And that, in the end, that didn't really work. But we kept building the Austin presence kind of in our vision, our image, and since have evolved. Now we're fully owned here. And really, our goal is to stay in Texas. I mean, I think it's we just believe that it's big enough, it's complex enough, and there's plenty to do here, and we don't need to go to other states. And that's sort of my ambition at this point. So yeah, it just kind of, the onion kept peeling back and kept digging a little deeper. Yeah, that was very early in the market development here in Texas. Austin was kind of one of the first spots, but it has since really, things have spread around Texas, very different markets. And there's 3 different primary market types, but it's it's been a growth industry from the beginning, but certainly not without its challenges, as we know.
When I started in solar in 2010 in New Jersey, we used to say that a neighborhood with deep solar penetration was one in which you were installing a system on one roof, and by eye of the crow, you could see at least one other house in the vicinity that has solar on it.
Right.
And those were the days where New Jersey SRECs were $710 a pop, and it was the darling of the U.S. solar industry.
Yeah.
And you could get a 10-year strip for $495 locked in at an SREC, which would have been the best purchase ever. Right. So that was New Jersey. You were in Texas in 2007 doing solar. What was that like?
What were you thinking? Well, so Austin is it's a municipally owned utility. So it's actually, there's a whole story there. It used to be a separate utility that was kind of one of the first in the country to promote green building, and kind of conservation as the core of the utility, and they eventually merged. Austin Energy has kind of a history of very progressive history, and it was early. It was first place in Texas for sure, but modeled itself actually after SMUD to some degree, early days in California. And so there was a strong rebate program. It was very, germinal at the time, and it has grown kind of with the market. But that's what I would say the initial catalyst. And there was, there's favorable sentiment at the time. Complementary, building community here was supporting that. But then in Texas, what's been interesting, and this was my hunch, just kind of lifelong Texan, and kind of knowing like Texas is its own market, its own grid. I kind of made a pact with myself. This was maybe a couple drinks in at the bar, but I said, if we can turn Houston, then we can turn the world. And it was really the idea that Houston is climatically one of the most difficult places, and the energy consumption per capita I think is the highest in the world, and energy is really cheap. So those things all conspire to say solar is sort of very much on the back burner. And what I've seen in 15 years is Houston has an amazing appetite for solar. And Houston is deregulated. It's a market solution. There's no incentives apart from the federal. Just means that, the market is signaling that solar is a great idea. So that's been really exciting and tells me, and sure enough, the rest of the world is, may leapfrog us depending on the way things go. But, the signals are really strong that this is it's not an incentive driven industry. This is it's a choice people are making, and they do it because it's sensible. So
yeah,
sure.
We also have our friends at Austin Energy, and have found them to be very progressive. I think Scanifly is among the only shading tools accepted by Austin Energy. They also approve the sun eye, but they don't approve remote shade data because they know that it's not that accurate. And we've always appreciated that degree of granularity. Our friends at some of the other state level regulators, when we were getting our shading tools approved, it was very scary for me to talk with one of the largest state level regulators in probably the world, and you might be able to deduce which one I'm alluding to get our shading analysis approved. And they go, what's the difference between satellite imagery and on-site imagery? And I said, real-time versus outdated, granular versus clear, trees versus no, it was pretty remarkable. So yeah.
It's such a profound point that I think, we were back in the day, we were all up on the roofs with a Pathfinder, as was the utility. So the utility was going behind, us, confirming things. And, I think the lesson was really clear that, solar is a distributed technology. And when you think about distributed, it's not at the zip code level. It's at the location. So it's so site dependent that, satellite's an incredible tool to get kind of a thumbnail picture of what your inclinations are. But if you get down to where things are happening, the level of detail that will impact not only performance of the system, but the success of a business or the success of an interaction with a customer, the details are too sensitive. They're too profound. And so, I think the utility here recognizes that, struggles with it because it's very difficult to scale. But I think as an ethic, you can't abandon that. And they have consistently been a good partner, sometimes a little bit overreach, I would say, but it's good. They pay attention, and that's been really good.
I think it's helpful for holding the industry accountable to not doing the alternative tactics. Compared to other utilities, they have been, I think, a much better partner versus fighting the growth of solar. I also think that on one side of it, I've heard many stories in Texas where people are putting solar panels intentionally on the back of their house because they don't want to be seen from the street, that they might align politically with another party, which is quite unfortunate. But I've heard several of those stories, and just hope it's not the north side. But on the other side of it, I'd like to think of Texas as an all the above energy, state. It's had the most growth of solar by capacity, I think, of any state in the country, right? It's got more wind than almost any state in the country. So yes, it's not just the oil and gas capital of the country or the world, maybe, but It's the energy capital in all ways, and let them all, like Texas does it, lower regulation and let the best win out.
Yeah, on the surface, that's definitely the tagline. I think there's certainly a deep history of how how the deregulated market and just how the energy market has unfolded. Certainly, it's not quite that. It's not a sandbox where the kids play, but I think the the reality is the market is saying, well, dispatchable, deployable, less expensive, the least expensive, these things that are just undeniable. And so the political tropes that kind of circle, the vultures that circle around and say we should do this or that. I mean, I think there's a common sense approach, and the folks that run energy companies around the world ultimately are sensible. Doesn't mean they might need to be checked in some ways, but I think the decisions that are being made are oftentimes common sense, financial, they're analytical, they are opportunistic for sure, and like you mentioned, the resources here are just profound. And so we're seeing that, and solar at the utility scale totally outstripped. And I think last year Texas added more megawatts than anywhere in the country for sure. And the wind far, like you said, far surpassed the RPS that was put in during the Bush era. So it's really it's kind of this strange, we call it the quiet revolution in Texas, that it's just happening, and it's widespread. So very relevant. I mean, I think that we get into politics really quickly, but energy as a new form of political caucus is powerful here. And so we're doing our part to make that evident. That's part of what, and I think uh, part of what you mentioned on Scanifly and the way we're using that and the ethics to say bring transparency and accuracy to every transaction, every interaction. Those are actually the things that carry forward. So if we think that we have a shot at building, let's say, a political caucus around renewable energy, it's got to be built on a strong foundation. So everybody who has a conception of what that is needs to say, yeah, that's solid. And so these are the kind of building blocks that we traffic in all of our customer experiences. So yeah,
Those values that you just listed are certainly inherent in your sales team and your sales motion. I want to dig into that a bit. Right, your team is a very turnkey, technically oriented, to some extent even project management focused group. Right, they seem to be able to do it all. How did you come to that business model as it relates to your sales reps, and what does that mean for your business as you grow?
Yeah, well, yeah, just to give, I mean, we are a vertically integrated company. So we, from origination all the way through long-term service. We have a traditional division between sales and operations, but I think you're right to say that our sales team has some inclinations that they can capture more of the project scope and complexity. We were slow to build out a sales team, I would say, and so we've grown organically. But I think to some degree, I was cautious not to get ahead, get over our skis too quickly. We actually did fulfillment for a while to try to understand kind of operational process, build some of those muscles, as it were, and also sort of look under the hood for some of the other sales approaches, and learning what not to do, learning the consequence of, let's say, skirting some of these values. We certainly didn't encourage it, but we observed it and we moved away from those things. And then in building out our team, the thing that it was hard to find solar experts or electrical, technical electrical people that could also sell something that's quite aspirational. So it's not just a technical sale. You're empowering someone to make a decision about their life, and it's a big ticket item. So these things have to be cared for. The one thought I had, and we've really committed to this, is that we would train everybody in house, but we would look for people who have been at cause at some point in their life. They've run a business. They've they're a published author, they've taught classes, or they were in a career where they were the responsible party. And so that it's the analogy we have, and a lot of us are rock climbers at some level, but you climb with the top rope, you're protected, someone else is protecting you. You get proficient, but the minute you start lead climbing, you're making decisions that are impactful. We don't go to free solo and all that, but the idea that you're responsible for your decisions, and we've got a safety net so people don't fail abjectly, but they need to feel the pressure of their decisions. And so if they don't come with that, that's oftentimes very risky for us to train them in that capacity. So our best salespeople had no sales experience in large part, and so that's kind of our first condition. I'd say the other principle that we operate by, one, I believe that if someone calls me or calls us, then they're basically hiring us. So that's the mindset. So we're not trying to win or close the deal. We're trying to solve the problem. And we don't solve every problem. Sometimes they go somewhere else, but we just imagine that's how we comport ourselves. And that's put the sales team, in the right state of mind. They don't see people as things to close. They see people that have expressed interest in solving a problem, and we can help them do that. And then the third thing is that sales team needs tools to be able to effectively solve those problems and efficiently. So one, they need training on what is a kilowatt hour and how do these things work. And then they need tools that serve as guardrails for, their decision making. And so those kind of I would say those three principles are how we constructed a sales team, and we built it slowly, and we've had amazing retention. We even have a customer who became a salesperson. So it's really, we look for the people that fit that kind of mold. And I mean, I think Jay, our sales manager and VP of sales now, has been with us for almost 9 years, and some of our sales guys have been with us for 6 years. So time is the other thing. They actually just become experts, and you can't do that overnight. So we've got to build a system where they can generate their own community and see the fruits of their labor over time. So it's not a quick buck, but it gets easier for them. So that's part of the model. They really do get more efficient.
I know one of the tools that you've outfitted your team with is a drone, which outwardly is not as common for salespeople to fly drones. Kind of secretly, we're hearing of it more and more being the closing tool of choice, but it's everyone's kind of secret sauce, so no one wants to whisper because it's hush hush. But I know you've been a little bit more forthcoming about sharing that. How did you come to that decision that was something you wanted to take on during the sales process and outfit your sales reps with a drone, and what those implications are?
Yeah, well, to give credit where credit is due, one of my business partners here is Jeff Bendall. He's in the service, runs our service department. He's been in solar as long as I have. It was probably in like 2014. He said he just had a notion like, could we ever use drones, to do X, Y, Z? Because we were up. He had worked as an installer for a while, and I think that inclination. So basically, what are the technologies that can make our world, our life easier, and bring a new level of precision where, effectively the thing that really we struggled with was, all the nuance and the complication of the one-off, projects. Solar is cookie cutter in the sense that it's the same set of components, but it's composed differently every time. And so you can't phone it in. And I think we just realized, we were pretty good. We were diligent, but as we started to grow and had to hire, site surveyors, they were okay. I mean, I had to teach them how to draw in a very specific way that communicated to the next, team. So it wasn't just about checking the box that a process was completed, but it was doing it in a way that captured, the design intent, the problems, the risks, and getting everything accurate. So that was exceedingly hard to maintain. And so I think we heard about Scanify was at some point, early, I think when y'all were getting started, and we were just intrigued and thought this would be super interesting. And so because my approach had always been that the site surveyor is part of the sales process. So the collecting of the information is not just for the engineering team or the downstream, but it's to reveal to the customer what the nature of the problem is. And they won't believe you if you send them a PDF with something all mashed up. But if you walk them out with somebody crawling all over the roof, they think, oh, I haven't thought of it that way. I never knew what my roof was. It's really a blind spot. So it's always been that activity. That initial site survey was always part of our sales motion, as you say, or sales process. And so there was a natural fit that the drone, the performative side of the drone flight would just fit in that world. And we were intrigued. The technology is incredible. It's exciting. We were surprised by how well it worked. And so, but it took time. So Jay and I, were strong proponents. Jay, we started with one drone, started flying it, and our idea, and this was probably the more difficult part, was that we wanted all of our sales individuals to own their own drones. Like, so they would sort of, buy in. And so we let that took a year or so. Some people were still doing rooftop, they were on the roof climbing around, and others were flying drones. And we let that kind of A/B testing work out, and the drones won out. I mean, it just was, a natural thing. So that was kind of that adoption phase, was really to make evident, what the drone was doing for us. And then we were then seeing what it was doing for our customers, interacting. That was something that we were also really, really surprised and kind of glad for.
So you're saying that on the interaction side, just needling that for a second, the drone as part of your process created a conversation starter. It was engaging. What does that look like in terms of a sales visit and how the drone is used?
Yeah. So, we've kind of figured that, and we're maybe unusual in the sense that we don't operate with high volume of leads, but we aim for, a strong closing rate, and we measure it on qualified leads. So most of our leads are inbound and referrals, or we're out getting them but we're not doing the sort of high volume digital trafficking, that we don't buy leads. So it just means anybody that calls us, like I said, we think that they're hiring us. So we already position that as being, something we need to care for and also invest in. So for us to go out to a site and fly a drone, even on let's say the interest, somebody says, I'm interested, not sure on timing. We don't do a calculus and say, there's a 20% chance this person won't do anything. We give people the benefit of the doubt, and we believe that, if we expose this process and then kind of involve the customer in the revelation of that information, and that it's not general, it's not approximate, it's very specific. And our proposal is a cost, a tailored cost proposal for their house. They get the sense that this is a real thing. And so it's really validating that our work is, it's not guesswork. We're not playing the numbers. So we have to have faith that our proposal and the value proposition is actually self-evident. If somebody says, well, I don't believe in progress, then it's like, okay, well, we'll move on. So we make some very fundamental assumptions, and we're willing to spend time and energy to honor that. And we found that kind of interaction, you use the word concierge. I mean, I think it's appropriate. You respect people, and they show up. Their better half shows up. And so from a kind of a time investment, it's made sense for us to go fly the drone, prepare the proposal based on that, represent the findings. And people have been, and incredibly excited about the drone. To some degree, this was in several years ago, 2021, 22. So more people are more familiar with drones, but it's from the perspective that they are interested in seeing us looking at their house and site, they are greatly engaged.
So, Stan, the interaction side is certainly a leveling up compared to, I'm sure, a lot of the competition. I'd love to hear in the numbers if that actually translates through. Do you recall close rates and some of the conversion metrics before you adopted the drone to how it's been after you've now added the drone as part of your sales process?
Yeah, we tried to kind of zone in on this, and I want to caveat this because I think the way we measure our close rates, based on basically on qualified leads, but it's really that is the top of the funnel for us. So we're, our target is between 20 and 30%. 30% would be exceptional. I think pre-drones we were like 21%, and it varies a little bit, seasonal and annual to some degree, but post drone we've been like 24, sometimes 25%. So so that's part of the story, and I think we're I think what even if we were flat, let's just say for us it's a huge success. One, it hasn't degraded our sales efficiency, but the immediate and let's say this, the salesperson's ability, their efficiency has gone up, so they're not on roofs. And I can't tell you what that does from a owner's, kind of risk assessment, as well as just their, quality of life. So those actors. And then because we're doing that on the front end, we're eliminating what is sometimes a follow-up step altogether. And so it's closed the gap between its sales and we'll say operations. So typically there's just knowing other companies, there's a handoff that is a set of checklists and you kind of throw it over the fence. But because the salespeople actually manage and have made decisions about that information, the way that they interact with the operations team beyond that has gotten much deeper. It's a much closer relationship. So the efficiency of that, let's say version control, things can get out of hand at that transition. That's becoming much more efficient. And these are guys that are strong sales oriented people that are now also operating a very process driven level. So that's something that's quite rare. And I think that the tool being something that gives them, a much richer set of documents and, sets of information has empowered them to do that. So that's a savings. It's a little hard to quantify what that is, but it's retention, it's ease of transition, it's transparency of information that flows across our teams. And I'd say the last thing that we've noticed that was one of the most striking things is just we have very few cancellations. I mean, I think I tried to tally them up, like in 15 years, maybe 10 projects. So we don't think in percentages, we think in numbers. And I think one was attributable to the person unfortunately passed away. So we have very few cancellations. That it's not something that corrodes our business. But we did wrestle with redesigns. So not to the extent that someone would, go away, but that we had to manage it in the field, and that was incredibly disruptive. And I think since adopting Scanifly, we've had a couple user error issues where someone was a little aggressive in the portal, but from the information, the substrate has been spot on. And so, we just had a conversation this past week, and our installers said the layout was incorrect, and they sort of tried to point the finger at Scanifly. Said, no, the information is solid. It's someone else, made a mistake, and that becomes, for us to be able to sort of rest on, something that's not variable is really powerful. So it gives us the ability to self-reflect on the parts that we do control, and we can problem solve from that point of view. So yeah, the numbers, I think there's been a meaningful bump, but really those other efficiencies that have played out have been incredible. And I think because it's on the sales side, we see that crossover, and that's what's been really exciting, that the sales team and the design team have gotten much closer.
Do you recall what your redesign or revision rate was pre Scanify and the drones versus now?
Yeah, and it definitely varied. I mean, there were times where we had extreme volume, just really high volume, and so we probably had modifications, in the field, and some were been unreported, but it was probably 20% of projects. So from the small to, let's say, the more impactful. But if it's a any kind of interruption in a flow, then it's a problem. So I categorize them all as the same. And post Scanifly, I mean, I think we went a year without any measurement questions. So it's
We
been
we
good.
talk we talk with a bunch of solar companies where they have a more technical process for their sales team. Sometimes they call them SV1 or SV2, or they expect the sales rep to get on the roof and get some basic measurements, and then they'll send someone out to do a more comprehensive electrical or structural look.
Mm-hmm.
And whenever you talk to the leadership, they're always very convinced that their sales reps are getting comprehensive data in the first visit. And then when you talk to the sales rep one-on-one, especially a beer in, they'll openly admit they almost never get on the roof. They eyeball it from the ground. They do a wheel along the yard. Maybe they climb up a ladder and they look above the roof and they do a rough sketch. I've never met a sales rep that actively does a good site survey, and yet everyone else is convinced that they're doing it. And it's funny to me because this solution, if the expectation is for the sales rep to be somewhat technical and to minimize a change up or a true up that would occur, a change order or a true up that would occur, this is the perfect fit for driving operational efficiency, let alone closing 3 or 4% more sales like you just quantified, right? The whole flow improvement, that avoiding that friction between sales and ops, it's all solved. Did you guys experience something similar?
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say, I mean, we did get on the roof. I mean, I know firsthand, which is I thought was unusual. I think here's the way I see it. We like to do a site visit with a homeowner present, and with in the new world of batteries and genuine electrical complexity, there are so many things that can impact, our proposed solution, let alone what a customer ends up wanting to do. Is that interaction has to stay grounded, no pun intended here, but it has to stay on the ground where the homeowner can talk to a salesperson and they can look at everything together. So if someone's on the roof, the homeowner is probably feeling very nervous, and not sure about all this someone climbing around, but they're not seeing what the salesperson is seeing, and that's the important lack. And so if we keep everybody on the ground looking at things together in kind of equal eyes, it gives our team the chance to navigate, what are the things that we need to solve that are going to move the needle for this person, that's the right solution, the right combination. So Scanifly sort of allows us to be on the ground with a roof's eye perspective that's accurate. So I think that very specifically the kind of sales interaction that is also a design interrogation, with technical chops, is kind of that really is our recipe. And so we can't actually imagine going back to the roof at all. So that would be a problem.
That would be. We on our block there was someone who was getting their chimney looked at. And whenever there's someone climbing on roofs in the neighborhood, I'm always just curious to know, are they going solar, or what another field services trade process looks like and how they approach the roof.
Yeah.
And I observed that after the initial dialogue with the homeowner, they're like, I'm going to go check it out on the roof. And homeowner goes back inside, conversation over. And
right.
the person's just getting out the ladder, going up the roof, and no homeowner A wants to watch it in case something happens,
right,
or B wants to be the person shouting up at the roof and the person communicating down. Its sales experience is over. Whereas almost the opposite occurs when you've adopted the drone. It's no, sales experience is now enhanced. We are now going to have an interactive component. This is the experiential component of the pitch, you know? We
Yeah.
even heard someone who used to put the drone controllers in the hands of the kids or the person making the purchasing decision. Hey, play around with it, experience what this is like. It completely flips over a sales motion.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we before pre-drones, when we had a very difficult customer, we'd actually invite them on the roof, and they would clamber up, and they would get to a point. It's like, I'm not getting up there. It's like, okay, well, we will. So there really is, if there's a sensitivity around the roof, let's say if that's where things are, happening, the homeowner, the decision maker has to understand that we approach that with care. And like you said, if you're separate, there's no way they can trust you, because the incentives are not aligned correctly. So the shared experience of looking at 3D image, a 3D model, gives that parity. So it kind of removes our sort of presumed authority, or our guardianship of information that they don't have access to. And it's a really profound kind of invitation into the process that you can't get otherwise. You can't fake it. And that's the important thing for us. Like, the homeowner that gets it, we know that they get it. And at that point, basically for us, it's like, do they want to do solar or not? It's not about, do they want it with us or not? So, the projects that we lose are ones that just we expect will come back. And it's not to be presumptuous or arrogant, but we just believe that, our role is to give information, and their role is to take action when it's appropriate for them. So yeah, it really has been a really fantastic alignment with kind of our core principles, and it's fit well with things that we were already inclined to, but it's enhanced it, and it's made it safer, more scalable, and honestly, we get a different perspective where we can all look internally. That same sort of collaboration on the information is something we can do internally. So we have a lot of experience in our team, and we can bring to bear on that information, which a manila folder with a hand scratch drawing for site survey does not inspire.
No, it does not inspire nor build confidence. It's been what you might as well hand over papyrus and hieroglyphics. It's that old fashioned. You're a true entrepreneur and innovator at heart, and we've had a lot of conversations over the years about different things. You've helped build startups and advise startups and build businesses, right? Why do you love this type of work? Where does this come from for you?
Yeah, it's a great question, Jason. I mean, I think, at some point, I think you mentioned your dad's quote about, quality and bitterness and sweetness. I think there was, at some point, I kind of committed myself to, a problem worth having. And I think back, I mean, Cory Booker's marathon 25-hour speech, I think, sort of, let's get in the right kind of trouble. It's something akin to that. I mean, I think I realized that we were talking about this the other day, like, this is really hard, our particular business. And I don't see it as just a business. I mean, we're, I think, all committed to things, whether we line up this way politically or philosophically, but what we're trying to solve is something that's never really been done that well. How do we build a civilization one piece at a time, and how do we do that? How build the plane while we're flying it, kind of thing. And that's what it's felt like. But I just kind of know at my core that this is the right problem to solve. Now it's I tend to think like we're a construction company at one level, we're a high tech, innovation lab, and then we're a retail business. And so when you look at the trends of those three separate businesses, they don't have any DNA overlapping, and in fact, they're working at very different speeds, and labor incompatibilities. All those things are really challenging, but it's what we need to bridge. I feel like it's something that we're past the age of centralized solutions. We're into peer-to-peer distributed systems, and we need empowerment at every level. So that to me is what kind of drives, like, this shows up in all kinds of ways. And what we can do both inside a business like this and then the adjacent businesses that bring value to it or unlock, obstacles or hurdles. I'm proud to be a part of this community where everybody is, innovating. And that's the other, it's really fascinating that you see innovation at the smallest levels, at, large levels. I've really been humbled to say that the things that stick are not the grandest visions. They're the ones that are the most persistent. And I think your adage is good. Like this question, you brought something up, I think, early in your preamble about scale and speed. Like in the 2010, it's like, hey, we've got this Sunshot initiative. Let's get to 1 million rooftops. Like, okay, we did it. But there was an idea that like if we could propel ourselves forward with enough velocity that we'd solve climate change. And it led to exactly what you said. Like, let's get the armies of door knockers out there. They pounded the glass up there, and then it all fell through the roof. I was thinking about this. There was a brain teaser that came up, I don't know, a few months back, when thinking about, are we slow? Are we slow and organic and deliberate, or will we ever have an impact? And I don't know if you've heard this, but it's kind of the lily pad in a 1 acre pond. And you could say, okay, the lily pads, they reproduce, they double every day in area, and it's a 1 acre pond. It's full, in 48 days. Like, at what day is it half full? Not to put you on the spot, but
Oh, I don't know. I don't know if there's like a mathematical answer or if this is a philosophical one.
Yeah, kind of both, I think. And it's so it turns out it's like day 47, it's half full, and the next day it's it doubles.
Right.
And so it's just like it's the exponential. And I had imagined that solar is a social technology first. So it doesn't have to be viral, it just has to be exponential. And so we're really we imagine that if we do this well and we don't interrupt the rate of expansion, we don't create negative space in it, then we'll have massive scale. It just doesn't look like it when you're in the early stages. And so that really is, I think you said it well in the beginning. Like, you need to surround yourself and equip yourself with all the tools and principles and values that keep you on that track. But I firmly believe, like, yes, we will reach scale. It won't look as, it's not a drag race. It's not quite a marathon, because we're our impact is growing all the time. So yeah, that's I guess to answer your question. I mean, it's a problem worth having, and I believe we can have impact. And we need to be a successful business. Like, that's not an option. So.
Thank you, Stan. Let's leave it there. We appreciate your insight in terms of solar being a fit for any type of building, with where we started to leveling up our sales tactics, to needing to think about this industry a little bit differently so we can keep doing this for another couple of decades. And who knows, maybe go back to that dive bar in Houston and look back and see how far we came. Stan, thanks so much for everything.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. Real pleasure.
Likewise.
Talk to you soon.